Imagine boarding a flight on your own private jet lease, only to be told you don't belong in the very seat you paid for. Imagine the humiliation of being singled out in front of strangers, not because of a mistake, but because of who you are and how you look. For Dr. Adrian Cole, a powerful black CEO with a calm presence and a quiet fire. That moment came 30,000 feet above the ground. A senior flight attendant's hand crossed the line literally, and in 10 minutes, Adrian's life, the crew's future, and an entire airline's policies would change forever. But what exactly happened in that narrow aisle? How did one measured, relentless woman turn an attempted public humiliation into an industry-wide reform? And why did the world start calling it the Cole Protocol? This isn't just another airline incident. This is a story about dignity, quiet power, and what happens when you refuse to let injustice fly. So before we taxi down this runway of truth, hit like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the takeoff. Buckle up, the flight you're about to hear will change the way you think about the skies. The first-class cabin of Flight 482 had that polished hush just before takeoff. The hum of the air vents, the soft clink of glasses in the galley, the faint scent of brewed coffee mixing with the sharper tang of jet fuel drifting in from the open door. Passengers were settling in, adjusting pillows, scrolling through their phones, glancing up as late boarders hurried past. Dr. Adrian Cole had already placed her carry-on neatly in the overhead bin and was seated in 2A, legs crossed, tablet in hand. Her outfit was simple but precise. A tailored navy blazer, ivory silk blouse, slim black trousers. The kind of attire that spoke of quiet authority. On her wrist, a slim rose gold watch caught the light with every subtle movement. She was reviewing notes for a board meeting in Denver when she sensed someone lingering beside her seat. She looked up. The senior flight attendant, Veronica Hale, stood there, hands on hips, a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was sweet on the surface, but carried an undercurrent sharp enough to slice. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you're in the wrong seat," Veronica said. Adrian tilted her head slightly, calm and unhurried. "This is 2A. Correct, yes. But first class is reserved for passengers who have purchased the proper fare," Veronica replied, her voice just loud enough to carry to nearby rows. Adrian set her tablet aside, reached for her purse. "I have my boarding pass right here." Veronica leaned in before Adrian could even retrieve it. "Let's not make this difficult," she said, lowering her voice but not her tone. "Coach is just a few rows back." A murmur ran through the first-class cabin. An older woman, and 1D later Adrian would learn her name was Martha O'Connor, turned in her seat, watching with open interest. Jerome Price, in 4C of business class, craned his neck. Adrian slipped a leather wallet from her bag and began to pull out her boarding pass. That was when Veronica's hand shot out. The slap wasn't on Adrian's face. It was on her hand, a sharp, stinging smack, as Veronica knocked her boarding pass back down into her lap. Gasps rose around them. "That's not necessary," Adrian said evenly, voice steady despite the sudden heat blooming across her skin. "It's entirely necessary," Veronica replied, her tone now louder. "For the safety and comfort of our paying passengers, I'm going to have to ask you to move." Phones were already out. Caleb Nguyen, seated diagonally across in 2C, had his camera app open. He tapped the red button. The recording began. "Ma'am, I will call security if you refuse to comply," Veronica continued, her hands clasped in front of her, posture radiating control. Adrian met her gaze. She didn't flinch. "I will remain in my assigned seat," she said softly. Martha O'Connor shook her head. "I've seen this before," she muttered to the man next to her. Some people just don't know their place. Jerome Price, still in business class, narrowed his eyes. He didn't know Adrian, but something about her composure struck him. He'd seen that kind of calm before in people who knew they were in the right, and who knew they had more than one way to prove it. Veronica turned toward the front galley. "Captain Foster," she called down the aisle. "We have a situation." Adrian exhaled slowly, her mind already measuring every variable. The timing before takeoff, the number of witnesses, the fact that multiple cameras were already recording. She could raise her voice. She could demand to see the captain immediately. But that would play directly into the caricature Veronica seemed eager to paint the difficult passenger, the troublemaker. Instead, she reached for her phone. 3 quick taps. 3 short messages sent. 1 to her assistant, 1 to her legal counsel, and 1 to a contact labeled simply contract line. Veronica returned with Stephen Ward, the head of in-flight operations for this flight. His suit was crisp, his tone brisk. "Ma'am, I understand there's been a misunderstanding," he began, though his posture suggested he'd already chosen a side. "There's been no misunderstanding," Veronica interjected. "She's in the wrong seat. I've asked her to move. She refuses." Stephen glanced at Adrian, then at the boarding pass now resting on her lap. He didn't reach for it. "We'll need to verify this at the gate," he said. "I'll have security escort you off for rebooking." Adrian's fingers brushed over the pass, but she didn't hand it over yet. "I'd like the captain to review this personally," she said. "That's not necessary," Stephen replied. "It is," Adrian said, her voice quiet but unyielding. Behind them, Caleb's camera caught every word, every shift and expression. The video would later be replayed thousands of times online, paused at the exact frame where Adrian's eyes locked on Stephen's, a calm refusal in their depths. "Ma'am," Stephen said again, a hint of irritation breaking through his veneer. "If you don't comply, we'll have to." Adrian's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, read the message without any visible change in expression. Then she set the phone down beside her. The plane was scheduled to push back in 12 minutes. The air in the cabin felt thicker now, the tension pressing down like a sudden change in altitude. Jerome Price leaned back in his seat, muttering to himself. He didn't like where this was going. Not one bit. In 2C. Caleb zoomed in, catching the faint red mark still visible on the back of Adrian's hand where Veronica had struck her. His live-stream comments were already filling with outrage. Adrian sat perfectly still, her breathing steady, her voice ready, but held in reserve. If they wanted a scene, they would have to make it themselves. She knew something they didn't, and soon, so would everyone else. The air in the first-class cabin had changed. It was no longer just the quiet pre-flight shuffle of seatbelts clicking and bags sliding into overhead bins. Now it carried something electric, tense, expectant, like the air before a storm. Veronica Hale didn't retreat after Stephen Ward's arrival. She stood a step back, chin lifted, eyes flicking toward the watching passengers as if gathering an audience for the show. Her voice had risen a notch, not enough to be called shouting, but perfectly pitched to carry across the leather seats and down the narrow aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, gesturing toward Adrian with one manicured hand, "we have a passenger refusing to move from a seat she did not pay for." A murmur swept through the cabin. Adrian could feel the weight of eyes on her, some curious, some judgmental, others already convinced of Veronica's version. She didn't look at them. She kept her gaze on Veronica, her posture unyielding. From 1D. Martha O'Connor leaned toward her seatmate, voice caring. "I knew it the moment she sat down. This happens all the time. People trying to sneak into first class." Adrian felt the words but didn't let them in. She had learned long ago that strangers could write entire stories about you in their heads, never caring if they were true. Responding to each one was like trying to swat away a swarm of gnats. Better to focus on the one person holding the real power in the moment. "Ma'am," Stephen said again, his tone now rehearsed. "The kind you use when you want to sound reasonable while applying pressure. You can come with us to the gate for verification, and if there's been an error, we'll rebook you." Adrian placed her boarding pass face up on her lap, but still didn't hand it over. "I will remain in my seat," she said evenly. "I have a valid first-class ticket." Veronica's smile thinned. "We've heard that before," she said loud enough for the passengers in row 4 to hear. She turned to the cabin. "Folks, this is exactly why boarding takes so long. People think they can just take whatever seat they want." In 2C, Caleb Nguyen's phone caught every second, his live stream now with over 100 viewers. The chat was alive with comments. Some defended Adrian, others echoed Veronica's assumptions, and a few, already suspicious, began asking who exactly Adrian Cole was. Jerome Price, still in his business class seat, felt the slow heat of frustration rising. He had been on enough flights to know the difference between a legitimate seating mistake and a manufactured power play. And this one, he thought grimly, was the latter. He stood, leaning forward slightly over the seat in front of him. "I saw her boarding pass when she came in," he said, voice deep and steady. It said 2A. Stephen's head snapped toward him. "Sir, please take your seat." Jerome's jaw tightened, but he sat down, not because Stephen told him to, but because he knew the battle wasn't his to lead, at least, not yet. Veronica pressed on. "Security is already on the way," she announced to no one in particular, though her eyes darted to Caleb's camera lens. "This will all be resolved in a few minutes." Adrian's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it one short line from her assistant. "All set. Proceed when ready." She slipped the phone into the side pocket of her bag, her fingers brushing the smooth leather of the card holder inside. "Not yet," she told herself. Timing mattered. Every second that passed was another second of Veronica building the wrong narrative, and every extra witness, every extra camera, would make the truth's arrival that much more devastating. A young man in 3A whispered something to his companion, their heads close together, eyes flicking between Adrian and Veronica. The conversation wasn't friendly. Adrian could feel it in the prickle at the back of her neck. Stephen glanced at his watch. "We're down to 10 minutes before scheduled pushback," he said to Veronica. "Let's expedite." Veronica nodded, turning back to Adrian. "Last chance, ma'am. Gather your belongings." Adrian looked at her, eyes steady. "I'm not moving." The words weren't loud, but they landed like a dropped stone in a still pond. Ripples moved through the cabin, a sharp intake of breath here, a whispered comment there. Veronica's lips pressed into a line. "Fine. Let's do this the hard way." She touched her earpiece. "Gate security. Please board now." From somewhere down the jet bridge came the muffled thud of heavy footsteps. The anticipation in the cabin sharpened. Caleb's live stream count hit 200. Martha O'Connor crossed her arms, a satisfied look on her face. "Finally," she said to no one in particular, "someone's handling it." Adrian's pulse was steady, but she could feel the weight of the moment pressing in. Every instinct screamed to end this now, to reveal what she carried in her bag. But she'd been in boardrooms, in negotiations, In government hearings, she knew the value of letting the other side walk right into their own undoing. The footsteps drew closer. 2 uniformed security officers appeared at the front of the cabin, filling the narrow aisle with their presence. One of them, a tall, broad man with a square jaw, stepped forward. "What's the situation?" he asked Stephen. "This passenger is in the wrong seat and refuses to move." Stephen replied without hesitation. The officer didn't even look at Adrian. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." Adrian spoke for the first time directly to him. "Before you remove me from this aircraft, I want the captain to review the boarding pass and ID in person." The officer glanced at Stephen, who shook his head. "Not necessary. We have authority here." Adrian's eyes didn't leave the officer's face. "Then you're about to make a very serious mistake." It was a gamble, phrased just so calm enough not to be defiant, but firm enough to signal that something was coming. Something big. Caleb's viewers were eating it up. "She's not scared at all." One wrote, "Bet she's somebody important." Another, "Why is the crew so quick to side with the F.A. Jerome Price?" exhaled slowly in his seat. He had the growing sense that the truth, when it came out, was going to hit like a hammer. The officer took a step forward. Ma'am Adrian reached down, her fingers resting on the card holder in her bag. "Not yet," she told herself again. Let them get just a little closer to the point of no return. Because when she did speak, when she did show them exactly who they were dealing with, there would be no undoing it, and the whole cabin would see. The 2 security officers didn't move yet. They stood at the edge of the first-class aisle, waiting for Stephen Ward's signal. One rested his hand lightly on the back of the seat in front of Adrian. The other kept scanning the cabin, eyes narrowing at the passengers with phones out. Veronica Hale folded her arms, satisfaction flickering across her face. "We can handle this quickly," she told Stephen. "No need to involve the captain. She's already made it clear she won't comply." Stephen gave a small nod, as if that settled it. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask one more time. Will you leave your seat voluntarily?" Adrian's gaze moved from Stephen to Veronica, then to the security officer whose hand now hovered a little too close to her shoulder. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. "If you insist on proceeding, I want it noted that I have requested captain review, and it has been denied." Stephen's eyes narrowed, but before he could answer, Caleb Nguyen shifted in his seat. His phone was angled discreetly, but the red recording light was still on. "It's all on video," he said under his breath. Not to Adrian exactly, but to the air around him. Every word. Veronica shot him a look. "Sir, filming crew interactions without consent is a violation of policy." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "So is hitting a passenger's hand." A ripple of murmurs spread through the first-class cabin. Jerome Price heard it from business class and leaned forward again. "I can confirm that." He called out, "I saw it happen." Stephen's jaw tightened. "Sir, please stay in your seat." "I am in my seat." Jerome replied evenly, "But I'm not going to pretend I didn't see what I saw." Adrian didn't smile, but something shifted in her posture. The smallest easing of her shoulders. Allies in unexpected places could be useful. The security officer closest to her leaned in slightly. "Ma'am, this can go easy or it can get complicated. Let's make it easy." Adrian met his eyes. "For you or for me?" He straightened, caught off guard. "Ma'am." "Because from where I'm sitting," she continued, "it looks like you're about to walk into something that will be complicated for everyone on this plane." Stephen made an impatient sound. "Enough. officers, escort her off. The taller of the two moved forward, but Adrian shifted her gaze to Veronica. "You're certain this is the route you want to take?" Veronica's chin lifted. "I'm certain." Adrian's phone buzzed in her lap. She glanced at it, another message from her assistant. "All confirmations in place. Timing is yours." Her mind flickered over the next moves like a chessboard. She could pull the card holder now, reveal her position, stop this before it went further. But every additional step they took without verifying her documents deepened the record of procedural failure. And the more they committed to their false assumptions, the more undeniable it would be when the truth came out. She let the phone rest again and kept her voice steady. "Then I request you document the reason for my removal in writing before we proceed." Stephen frowned. "That's not standard procedure." "Neither is hitting a passenger," Caleb muttered, not looking up from his phone. Veronica's lips pressed together, but she didn't respond. From the back of first class, a younger passenger whispered something to her companion. Caleb's live stream caught it. Why aren't they just checking her ticket? The question lingered in the air like smoke. Stephen ignored it. "Let's move." The officer stepped in. Adrian didn't resist, but she didn't stand either. "I will leave this seat," she said quietly, "only when the captain personally instructs me to." Stephen turned toward the galley. "Renee," he called toward the cockpit door, "we need to move a passenger." The door remained closed. Adrian noticed Damian Brooks, the first officer, appear for just a second in the narrow space before the cockpit door closed again. His eyes met hers briefly, and then he was gone. Something in that glance told her he knew more than he was saying. Stephen gestured to one of the officers. "Get Captain Foster out here if you must. We're already delayed." Veronica huffed, as if the delay was somehow Adrian's fault alone. She turned back toward the galley, muttering into her earpiece. Adrian let her fingers brush the smooth edge of the card holder inside her bag. She could feel the embossed lettering through the leather. The weight of it was more than physical. It was the weight of contracts, of influence, of 1,000 boardroom negotiations. When she brought it out, there would be no mistaking who she was. The officer closest to Stephen said quietly, "She's calm." "Not the usual case. Calm can be dangerous." Stephen replied, "Let's wrap it up." Adrian's eyes moved slowly around the cabin. Martha O'Connor still looked convinced she was in the wrong, her expression smug. Caleb's phone was angled high now, catching both Adrian and Stephen in the same frame. Jerome sat with his arms crossed, watching like a man waiting for the tide to turn. Her phone buzzed again this time. A new message. Media monitoring active. Live stream views climbing. 12 minutes to departure had become 7. Finally, the cockpit door opened. Captain Renee Foster stepped out, her expression already lined with irritation. "What's going on?" she asked Stephen. "Passenger in the wrong seat, refusing to move." Stephen said quickly. Captain Foster looked at Adrian, then at the boarding pass still resting on her lap. She reached for it. Adrian handed it over without a word. The captain's eyes scanned the pass, then moved to the ID Adrian produced from her wallet. For just a moment, her expression froze. It was a flicker, almost imperceptible, but Adrian caught it. So did Caleb's camera. Captain Foster handed them back. "Stephen, I'll speak with you in the galley." Stephen hesitated. "Captain, we need to galley," Foster repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. As they walked away, Veronica hovered, clearly unhappy about being left out of the huddle. The security officer stepped back slightly, still keeping Adrian in view. Adrian rested the boarding pass on the armrest, her fingers light against the paper. The timing was nearly perfect now. The moment was coming. When she moved, it would not just be to protect herself. It would be to make sure every person on this plane understood exactly what had happened and exactly who had been sitting in 2A all along. Captain Renee Foster didn't return right away. The first-class cabin felt suspended in a strange limbo, as if the air itself were holding its breath. The security officers shifted their weight, one leaning against the bulkhead, the other standing a step back from Adrian's seat. Veronica Hale paced at the edge of the galley, her earpiece still in place, whispering updates to someone unseen. Stephen Ward's voice was low and tense from just beyond the curtain, where he and the captain spoke in hushed tones. Adrian sat perfectly still, the boarding pass once again on her lap. The thin paper seemed to draw as many stares as she did. Caleb Nguyen's camera caught it all, the red recording light blinking steadily. His live-stream view count ticked higher with each passing minute. A young man in 3A leaned toward his companion and whispered, "If she's telling the truth, this is going to look really bad for the crew." In 1D, Martha O'Connor gave a small, derisive laugh. "Please, she's probably hoping to bluff her way into the seat. Happens all the time. Jerome Price, still in business class, had heard enough." He stood, leaning over the low divider between cabins. "I told you before. I saw her boarding pass. It said 2A. No bluff." Martha shot him a withering look. "And I suppose you saw her pay for it too." Jerome's jaw tightened. "I don't need to. A ticket's a ticket." The words rippled through the surrounding passengers, stirring a quiet argument. Two women in row 3 exchanged uneasy glances. One murmured that maybe the crew should just scan the ticket again. The other shrugged, saying they probably already had. Adrian's eyes flicked toward Caleb's phone. In the scrolling comments, she caught snippets people arguing, others demanding the airline's name, a few speculating about her identity. She didn't linger on the screen. What mattered was the scale. The conversation was already bigger than the cabin. Veronica returned from the galley, her expression tight. "Security, stand by," she instructed. "We may need to proceed." One of the officers glanced toward the cockpit, where Captain Foster still hadn't reappeared. "What's she doing?" he asked quietly. "Protocol review," Veronica replied, but her tone betrayed impatience. Adrian watched her closely. Veronica's confidence was still there, but beneath it was something else, the first glimmer of uncertainty. The longer the captain took, the more room there was for doubt to grow. Caleb cleared his throat. "Question," he said into the cabin. "If there's any doubt about the ticket, why not scan it again right here?" Veronica's head snapped toward him. "Sir, this isn't your concern. It's all of our concern." Jerome called from behind. "We're all stuck here until you figure it out." Martha muttered something under her breath, but the man in 1C, who had been silent until now, looked at Veronica and said, "He's right. This is making the whole flight late." Veronica's eyes hardened. Delays are caused by non-compliance, not by crew procedure. Adrian finally spoke, her voice low but carrying in the hush. "Delays are caused when truth is ignored." Several heads turned. Even the officers looked at her then, one eyebrow lifting slightly. Stephen Ward emerged from the galley. His expression was pinched, his shoulders tight. "Captain Foster is reviewing the documentation. Until she's finished, everyone stay seated." Veronica stepped closer to him. "We need to remove her now?" The captain can review after. Stephen shook his head slightly, though not enough to meet Adrian's eyes. Not yet. The shift was subtle, but Adrian felt it. The balance was starting to tilt. Her phone buzzed again. A short message from her legal counsel. Stream verified. Media traction strong. All systems ready. She let the phone rest on the armrest for a moment, the words echoing in her mind. All systems ready. Martha crossed her arms, tapping her fingers against her sleeve. This is ridiculous, she said loudly. If I pulled a stunt like this, I'd be in cuffs by now. Jerome leaned into the aisle. Maybe that's the problem. Some people are treated like they belong here. Some aren't. The sentence landed heavily in the space between them. Adrian didn't add to it. She didn't need to. Jerome's words were enough to stir a few uncomfortable shifts in seats. Caleb's phone picked up the reactions, capturing the tension as clearly as the dialogue. His viewers were already dissecting every expression, every silence. The curtain to the galley moved, and Captain Foster stepped out. She walked with purpose, her eyes scanning the cabin. When they landed on Adrian, something flickered again: recognition, perhaps, or understanding. She stopped beside Stephen. I've reviewed the ticket and ID. They're valid. A wave of whispers spread instantly. Caleb's camera swung to catch Veronica's face as her mouth tightened, her jaw clenching. Then we're done here, Jerome said, leaning back with satisfaction. But the captain didn't move on. She glanced at Adrian again, as if measuring something deeper than the paper in her hand. Dr. Cole, is there anything you'd like to say before we resume boarding procedures? Veronica blinked. Dr. Cole. Adrian met the captain's eyes. Yes, there is. The silence that followed was complete. No one shifted, and no one spoke. Adrian reached for her bag, her fingers brushing the leather card holder, but she didn't draw it out just yet. Not here. Not in the middle of noise. She wanted their full attention. She wanted the moment to be unmistakable. I'd like to address the way this was handled, she said slowly, her gaze steady on Stephen, then Veronica. And I'd like to ensure every person in this cabin understands why it matters. The captain's brow furrowed slightly, but she gave a small nod. Very well. I'll give you the floor for a moment. Adrian's voice was calm, each word placed with precision. There are two ways to respond when someone challenges your presence. You can defend yourself loudly, hoping to outshout them, or you can let them write their own account, while you gather every piece of proof that will undo them. Caleb's camera zoomed in, catching the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. I chose the second option, Adrian said, and in that moment, the air shifted again. Because though she hadn't yet revealed the card, or the contracts, or the weight of the influence she carried, every person in that cabin could sense it was coming. When it did, it would not just answer the question of her seat. It would rewrite the entire story. Captain Renee Foster's words still lingered in the air. The passengers were digesting the fact that Adrian's ticket and ID had been declared valid. For a moment, it felt as if the situation might settle. But Veronica Hale wasn't done. She stepped forward again, her voice sharper now. Captain, the documents might be valid, but this passenger has disrupted the boarding process and refused to follow crew instructions. We can't just ignore that. Stephen Ward nodded in agreement. It's about compliance and procedure. The delay we've already experienced is significant. We're at risk of losing our departure slot. Adrian watched them both, her hands resting loosely on her lap. They were grasping for new justifications now that the ticket issue had been stripped away. It was the familiar pattern she had seen in boardrooms when someone refused to admit they were wrong. The story changed. The blame shifted. But the underlying resistance to accountability stayed the same. Jerome Price leaned into the aisle from his seat in business class. If you're worried about delays, maybe stop harassing the person who's supposed to be sitting there. Martha O'Connor shot him a look of disbelief. Harassing, she refused to move when the crew asked. That's the definition of non-compliance. It's the definition of knowing your rights. Jerome replied. Caleb Guyon's live stream was buzzing. Comments poured in. They're backpedaling. She's too calm. She knows something. This is going to blow up online. His viewer count had passed 500 and showed no signs of slowing. Captain Foster's eyes moved between the crew and Adrian. We need to make a decision right now, she said. Gate control is waiting for confirmation. Stephen's voice hardened. Then let's remove her. Security. Before you act, Adrian said quietly, you should know that removing me without cause will have consequences far beyond this flight. Veronica gave a short, disbelieving laugh. Is that a threat? No, Adrian replied, her tone even. It's a fact. Stephen folded his arms. We've heard enough. Officers, please assist the passenger in deplaning. The taller of the two security officers stepped closer, his hand resting just above the armrest. Ma'am, I'm asking you to come with us. Adrian looked up at him. Her voice was calm, but there was a steel thread running through it. Before you do, ask yourself one question: will you be in the video? The officer hesitated, glancing toward Caleb's phone, which was indeed pointed directly at them. Veronica broke the moment. Let's go. We don't have time for games. Adrian's mind was moving quickly now. She had let them push far enough to establish a clear record of procedural failure. The live recordings, the witnesses, the captain's initial reluctance. It was all in place. There was no reason to wait any longer. Her hand slipped into her bag, fingertips brushing the familiar leather of the card holder. She pulled it out and placed it on the tray table in front of her. The black leather caught the cabin light in a soft sheen. Stephen frowned. What's this proof? Adrian said simply. She opened the card holder and took out one card, setting it face down. Captain Foster, she said, before you make any final decision, I recommend you read this. The captain stepped forward, reaching for the card. But Veronica moved faster, snatching it up and flipping it over with a smirk, one that vanished almost instantly as her eyes registered the gold-embossed lettering. Stephen leaned over her shoulder, his face drained of color. What exactly am I looking at? The taller security officer asked, stepping closer. Her business card, Veronica said flatly, though the word business sounded hollow now. Caleb shifted in his seat to capture the card clearly on a stream. His viewers saw the name before anyone explained it aloud. Dr. Adrian Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Cole Dynamics. Jerome let out a low whistle. Well, that explains a lot. Martha blinked, confused. What's Cole Dynamics? Jerome turned toward her. One of the biggest aerospace companies in the country. They build and lease aircraft to half the airlines in North America. Martha's eyes flicked back to Adrian, the certainty in her expression faltering. Stephen's voice was quieter now, but still defensive. That doesn't change the fact that she disrupted boarding. Adrian tilted her head. You mean the fact that I refused to be moved from the seat I purchased on an aircraft my company leases to your airline? A ripple of surprise passed through the cabin. Even Captain Foster's posture shifted. Veronica tried to recover. Anyone can print a fancy business card. Adrian reached into her bag again, this time producing a sleek tablet. She tapped the screen twice and turned it toward Captain Foster. Displayed in high resolution was the lease contract for this specific aircraft, complete with its tail number, N846CD, and the Cole Dynamics logo at the top. "This plane," Adrian said evenly, "is under a 7-year renewable lease with Cole Dynamics. Your airline pays us $2.6 million annually for its use." The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the low hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. Caleb's livestream chat exploded. "This is insane. She owns the plane. Veronica is done." Stephen took a small step back, his eyes flicking toward the captain as if looking for rescue. But Captain Foster's face was unreadable now. Adrian placed the tablet back in her bag and rested her hands on the armrests. "Now that we've clarified my right to be in this seat," she said, "shall we address the behavior that brought us here?" The officers exchanged glances, clearly unsure of their next move. Veronica's mouth opened, then closed again. Her usual command of the cabin had evaporated. Adrian didn't press further, not yet. She could feel the momentum shifting entirely into her control, but she knew this was only the beginning. What happened next would not just resolve her seat dispute. It would set the stage for a reckoning. The silence in the cabin felt heavy now, like a pressure system moving in before a storm. Passengers who had been whispering earlier were sitting straighter, leaning in, their attention locked on Adrian. She reached for her water glass and took a slow sip, her movements unhurried, as if the whole flight had been put on her schedule instead of the airline's. The simple act, done without apology, carried more weight than raised voices ever could. Captain Renee Foster still had the business card in her hand. She turned it over once more, the embossed gold letters catching the cabin light. When she looked at Adrian again, her voice was quieter. "Dr. Cole, I'd like to step aside and discuss this in private." Adrian shook her head. "No. This happened in front of every person in this cabin. It will be addressed in front of them, too." Stephen Ward exhaled sharply. "This isn't a board meeting. Dr. Cole." Adrian's gaze didn't shift to him. "No, Mr. Ward, but you've made it a public matter by handling it this way. You had the opportunity to verify quietly. You chose spectacle." Several passengers nodded subtly. Caleb Nguyen's phone caught it, the camera picking up expressions of agreement. His viewer count had crossed 700. Comments scrolled fast. "She's in control now. They're scared. I want to see where this goes." Veronica Hale's jaw was tight, her hands clasped in front of her. She glanced toward the galley, as if looking for backup, but none came. Regardless of her title, she refused crew instructions. "That's a violation." Adrian tilted her head slightly. "And striking a passenger's hand is what compliance training." The line landed hard. A ripple of murmurs spread through the first-class cabin. Even Martha O'Connor shifted in her seat, the rigid certainty in her posture softening. Captain Foster glanced between them. "Dr. Cole, I think we should." Adrian lifted a hand gently, not to silence, but to hold the moment. "Captain, I respect your position, but before we move on, I want to be clear about the context. My company leases 68 aircraft to this airline. That includes the one we're sitting on right now. The contracts governing those leases include conduct clauses, anti-discrimination provisions, and compliance with passenger rights." Stephen tried to interrupt, but she continued without looking at him. "When those clauses are violated, we reserve the right to review or terminate the lease. In extreme cases, we can ground the aircraft involved." The words "grounded aircraft" seemed to hang in the air. Caleb's live stream chat exploded. She can ground the plane. Oh, it's over for the crew. Jerome Price's voice came from the row behind. Captain, I think the lady's trying to save you from making this worse. Adrian's eyes finally moved to Stephen. Mr. Ward, you had every opportunity to check my ticket and ID without this escalation. You didn't. Instead, you supported a staff member who made a public accusation and added physical contact. That was your choice. Stephen's face flushed. We acted on the information presented. No, Adrian cut in, her voice still calm but firm. You acted on assumption. An assumption is not information. The taller security officer shifted his stance, glancing toward the other as if to say, We're not touching this anymore. Captain Foster cleared her throat. Dr. Cole, I acknowledge your point. What do you propose? As a way forward, Adrian didn't answer immediately. She reached into her bag again, pulled out a slim silver pen, and began jotting something in the margin of the boarding pass. The cabin was quiet enough that the soft scratch of the pen on paper could be heard. When she looked up, her eyes swept the passengers before settling back on the captain. I want this documented. Every action from the moment I boarded to now. I want a written statement from you, from Mr. Ward, and from Ms. Hale, before this plane takes off. Veronica blinked. Before takeoff. It's exactly possible, Adrian said. You have the forms. Use them. Stephen opened his mouth, but Captain Foster spoke first. We can do that? Veronica turned toward her. Captain, you can't be serious, I am, the captain said, her tone final. Adrian leaned back in her seat. Once that's complete, we will proceed with the flight. But be aware my legal and public relations teams are already monitoring this situation in real time. Every delay and every action from this point forward will be documented in the same detail as the last 20 minutes. Caleb's phone caught Veronica's expression as she processed the reality of who she had just picked a fight with. The smug certainty from earlier had evaporated, replaced with something else calculation. Martha O'Connor cleared her throat from 1D. I might have been too quick to judge. Her voice was hesitant, but it was something. Adrian's eyes softened slightly, acknowledging that is the first step toward making better judgments in the future. Jerome chuckled quietly. Some people here are going to have a story to tell when they get home. The captain gave a short nod to Stephen. Get the forms. He hesitated, then disappeared into the galley. Veronica followed reluctantly, her shoulders stiff. Adrian took another sip of water, the clink of ice in the glass, the only sound in her row. She could feel the energy in the cabin shifting not just toward her, but away from the crew. Trust was being recalibrated in real time. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from an internal number at Cole Dynamics media coverage beginning. Your call. She slid the phone back into her bag without replying. There was no rush. The story was already leaving the confines of this aircraft, spilling into a much larger arena. When Stephen returned, he placed the forms on the fold-out table in front of Adrian. Here. She glanced at them. Captain's statement first. Please. Stephen's jaw clenched. She's busy. Adrian didn't blink. So am I. Captain Foster stepped forward, taking the form from Stephen without a word. She sat in the empty seat beside Adrian and began to write. Caleb's viewers were losing their minds. This is wild. She's making the captain write a statement right there. Adrian waited, silent, until the pen lifted from the page. Then she took the statement, scanned it quickly, and nodded. Thank you. She handed the form back. Now Mr. Ward's, then Ms. Hale's, and then we'll fly. There was no question anymore about whether they would comply. The momentum had shifted completely. Adrian had moved from defending her place to commanding the space, and everyone knew it. The captain's statement sat neatly on Adrian's tray table, signed and dated. Stephen Ward was filling out his own, his handwriting quick and clipped, while Veronica Hale lingered at the far end of the galley, speaking into her earpiece in a low voice. Adrian watched the scene without speaking, her mind already moving beyond this cabin. She knew the chain reaction had started the moment Caleb Nguyen's livestream broke 5 digits in viewership. The story was too compelling, too visual to stay contained. Her phone buzzed with a call from a number marked executive line. She answered without hesitation. Adrian Cole. The voice on the other end was crisp, controlled, with a faint edge. Dr. Cole, this is Linda Chavez, Regional Director for North Star Airlines. I've been briefed on an incident aboard Flight 482 involving you. Adrian kept her tone even. Then you already know your senior crew attempted to remove me from my purchased seat, physically struck my hand, and made public accusations without verifying my documents. I've heard the outline, Chavez said. I'm trying to understand how we resolve this before it escalates further. Adrian let the silence stretch for 2 beats. It's already escalated. You're calling me mid-flight, which means the usual corporate firewall has been bypassed. That doesn't happen unless someone's hair is on fire. Chavez hesitated. I'm aware of your company's relationship with our fleet operations. Good, Adrian said. Then you also know I'm in a position to review that relationship in light of this incident. The security officers nearby exchanged glances. They couldn't hear the whole conversation, but they could read the body language. Adrian was not speaking like someone on the defensive. Caleb's camera caught her side profile as she spoke, her expression composed but unyielding. His viewers were reacting in real time. She's on the phone with corporate. They're in trouble. What would it take, Chavez asked, to keep this from becoming a public spectacle? Adrian glanced at Caleb's phone. That ship has sailed. What you can do now is take public accountability, effective immediately. I expect the suspension of the flight attendant involved, the removal of the in-flight operations manager from this flight, and a formal commitment to retrain all frontline staff on passenger verification procedures and bias awareness. That's a significant demand to make mid-operation. Chavez said. It's not a demand. Adrian replied. It's the minimum requirement for continued partnership. There was a pause, and Adrian could almost hear the mental calculus happening on the other end, the risk to contracts, the potential media fallout, the stock market implications. I'll authorize the suspension of the flight attendant, Chavez said carefully, and the manager's removal. And the public commitment? Adrian pressed. Another pause. We'll issue a statement before Wheels Up. Adrian nodded slightly, though Chavez couldn't see it. You have 20 minutes. She ended the call without waiting for further comment. Stephen Ward was still writing when Adrian looked over at him. When you're done, leave it on my table. He didn't meet her eyes. Yes, ma'am. Captain Foster stepped closer. Dr. Cole, Ms. Chavez will want to speak to me directly. Should I wait until we're airborne? No, Adrian said. Do it now. Every minute we delay resolution, this grows. The captain gave a short nod and disappeared toward the cockpit. From the galley, Veronica returned, her expression a mixture of defiance and wariness. I'm told I'm being suspended pending investigation. Adrian didn't look up from the captain's statement she was rereading. That's a start. Veronica's jaw tightened. You think this is fair? Adrian met her gaze. You had the chance to de-escalate before it began. You chose the opposite. Fairness isn't the question anymore. Accountability is. Martha O'Connor, who had been silent since her earlier admission of doubt, shifted in her seat. Ms. Hale, I think maybe you should let this go. The remark surprised even Adrian. It was one thing for Martha to soften toward her, another entirely for her to address Veronica directly. Caleb's live stream caught it all, his audience reacting with disbelief. Even the lady in 1D is telling her to stop. The tide turned fast. Jerome Price spoke up again from business class. Captain, any update on when we'll be leaving? We're resolving final documentation. Adrian answered before the captain could. Once that's complete, we'll depart, but the resolution includes immediate accountability. One of the security officers, a younger man who had been silent until now, stepped a little closer to Adrian. Ma'am, if I may, I've been doing this for 11 years. I've never seen anyone handle something like this the way you have. Adrian's eyes softened briefly. That's because most people don't have the resources or the position to push back. That's why this can't just be about me. The words seemed to land on the passengers. Even those who hadn't spoken were watching her differently now, not as just a passenger defending her seat, but as someone drawing a larger line. Stephen placed his completed statement on the table in front of her, the paper sliding forward with a faint whisper. Here. Adrian scanned it quickly. It was factual enough, but avoided certain key admissions. She circled 2 sections with her pen and handed it back. Correct these. Accuracy matters. He hesitated, then took the paper back and returned to the galley. Caleb's viewer count ticked past 800. His chat was a mix of astonishment and praise. She's running this like a boardroom. Imagine being that calm while holding that much leverage. The captain returned a few minutes later. Ms. Chavez has confirmed the public statement will be issued before departure. Veronica Hale will be removed from this flight, effective immediately. Stephen Ward will be replaced mid-route by a relief manager in Denver. Adrian nodded once. That's acceptable for now. Veronica's lips pressed into a thin line. She gathered her belongings in stiff movements, avoiding eye contact with the passengers as she stepped toward the door. The sound of her rolling bag over the threshold was strangely final. The captain looked to Adrian. Are we ready to proceed? Adrian glanced at Caleb's phone one more time. Almost. I want the passengers to hear exactly what's changing because of this. She stood, smoothing her blazer. Her voice was clear but not raised. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. The events you've witnessed today are unacceptable in any professional setting, let alone during travel. As of this moment, the airline has committed to staff retraining, new verification procedures, and immediate suspension of personnel involved. A smattering of applause began, growing louder as Jerome clapped from his seat. Even Martha joined in, her earlier resistance fully dissolved. Adrian sat back down. Now we can fly. The captain signaled the security officers, who moved quietly toward the door. Stephen returned from the galley, his expression tight but subdued. The engines began to hum with a rising pitch, the vibration running through the cabin floor. Adrian picked up her water glass again. Outside the oval window, the jet bridge was pulling away. Inside, the balance of control had shifted permanently. She wasn't just staying in her seat. She had changed the entire flight's trajectory in more ways than one. The engines roared with that familiar surge as the aircraft began to taxi. The sudden forward motion seemed to snap the passengers back into the awareness that, yes, they were finally leaving the gate. Still, The energy in the cabin was different from any takeoff Adrian had ever experienced. She could feel eyes on her, not in suspicion, but in curiosity, respect, even gratitude. She hadn't planned to speak again, but she understood momentum when she saw it. It was a rare thing to have this many witnesses aligned on one truth. As the plane turned toward the runway, Captain Foster's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your patience. We're number 2 for departure. We expect a smooth flight to Denver with clear skies en route." Adrian waited until the captain's announcement ended, then unbuckled her seatbelt just enough to lean forward slightly. She caught Caleb's eye and gestured subtly. He angled his phone so it would pick up both her and a good portion of the cabin. "Before we're fully airborne," Adrian said, her voice low but carrying just enough for first class to hear, "I want to share something with you all. What happened here today isn't unusual for many people. The difference is that I have the means to challenge it in real time." Jerome nodded slowly from his seat behind her. Martha O'Connor leaned forward, listening closely. Most travelers who experience bias or mistreatment don't have a platform or a contract that lets them speak with the airline's regional director before pushback. Adrian continued, "They can't call for suspensions or retraining in the middle of boarding, which is why, when someone can, they must." There was no applause this time, just a quiet acknowledgement. The weight of what she was saying didn't need noise to land. The plane began its acceleration, pressing everyone back into their seats. Adrian buckled herself again, holding the armrest lightly. The hum rose into a steady roar, and the nose lifted. For a moment, all other concerns were suspended in the strange, floating stillness that comes just after takeoff. Once they leveled out and the seatbelt sign chimed off, a flight attendant from business class, a younger man Adrian hadn't seen during boarding, approached her. He had kind eyes, the kind that softened the edges of uniformed authority. His name tag read Damien Brooks. "Dr. Cole," he said quietly. "I just want to say, I'm sorry for what happened. I was in the aft galley during boarding, but I saw the video. You handled that with a lot of grace." Adrian studied him for a moment, sensing sincerity. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks, and thank you for saying it here, where it matters." Damien hesitated, then added, "If you need anything during the flight, anything at all, just let me know. I'd rather you have one point of contact you can trust." She nodded. "I'll remember that." He gave a small, respectful incline of his head and moved back toward the galley. Caleb, still recording, mouthed, "He's different." His chat agreed, lighting up with comments about Damien's professionalism. Adrian opened her tablet again, this time not to display contracts but to draft an outline. She titled it simply, "North Star Airlines Accountability Framework." She began typing bullet points, each one informed by years of corporate negotiation, but shaped now by the human reality she'd just witnessed. Independent verification process for passenger documentation before escalation. Mandatory bias awareness training for all crew members. Anonymous reporting system for passengers and staff to flag discriminatory incidents. Immediate suspension protocols for verified misconduct. As she typed, she thought about the ripple effect this could have. If one airline implemented such measures publicly, competitors would be pressured to match them. The seatbelt sign dinged on again as they encountered light turbulence. Adrian steadied her tablet. Unfazed. She had been through much worse in boardrooms than a little shaking at altitude. Damien reappeared with a glass of sparkling water and a warm towel. "Compliments of the cabin," he said with a small smile. "Figured you could use a reset." She accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." The towel's heat was grounding. The citrus scent a small luxury amid the charged atmosphere. From across the aisle, Martha spoke up. "Dr. Cole, if you don't mind me asking, why didn't you just tell them who you were right away?" Adrian met her eyes. "Because the point isn't who I am. The point is that the treatment was wrong regardless of my title. If I revealed my position too soon, it might have been dismissed as special privilege instead of an example of a broken process." Martha absorbed that, her gaze thoughtful. "I suppose that makes sense. It's a lot to think about." "It should be," Adrian said softly. A notification popped up on her tablet draft corporate statement, ready for review. She opened it and scanned the text. It was a careful piece of writing, too careful. Words like incident and perception and regret floated in a sea of non-committal language. She marked it up immediately, replacing half the cautious phrases with direct acknowledgments. She added one sentence at the end: "Northstar Airlines will take immediate, transparent action to prevent discriminatory treatment of passengers in partnership with Cole Dynamics." That was the line that would make the difference. She hit send, returning the edits to Linda Chavez with a note. "If you can't commit to this, we'll discuss the future of your fleet agreements on Monday." Caleb was still filming, though more discreetly now. "You're rewriting their statement mid-flight," he whispered. Adrian gave a faint smile. "It's easier to change a press release than an aircraft lease." Jerome laughed quietly at that. "You're something else. Dr. Cole." The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the crew prepared for meal service. Damien returned, offering a choice of entrees. Adrian selected one without fuss. She wasn't here to make anyone else's job harder, not if they were doing it right. As she ate, she kept an ear tuned to the quiet murmurs around her. Passengers were talking about their own travel experiences, times they'd seen or endured something wrong but hadn't spoken up. She didn't insert herself into those conversations. It was enough that they were happening. By the time the trays were cleared, her tablet pinged again. Linda Chavez had replied, "Approved. Will issue within the hour." Adrian exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in acknowledgement. One step down, many more to go. She glanced out the window at the clouds passing below. This wasn't just about reclaiming a seat. It wasn't even just about one airline. It was about setting a precedent that could stretch across an industry. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engines fill the space where adrenaline had been. The real fight, she knew, would begin after they landed. But here, at 36,000 feet, she had already shifted the power dynamic, and she wasn't done yet. The cabin had settled into that quiet lull that comes after meal service. Overhead lights were dimmed, passengers either reading, watching seat-back screens, or drifting into sleep. Adrian sat upright, tablet in her lap, scanning industry reports she'd pulled up to anticipate Northstar's potential counter-moves. Damien Brooks passed by with a soft nod, checking on her without intruding. Even that small gesture registered with her the difference between performative service and genuine presence was always in the details. Her phone buzzed once. She expected another update from Linda Chavez. Instead, the message was from her chief of staff, Taylor Bryant. "Heads up. I'm hearing chatter from 2 major outlets that Northstar PR is shopping an alternate version of events to reporters. They're suggesting you were combative and uncooperative with crew directives." Adrian's jaw tightened, but her breathing stayed slow. This wasn't surprising. Damage control was an instinctive corporate reflex, especially when reputations were on the line. But doing it while she was still in the air that was bold. or reckless. She typed back, "Do not respond yet. Capture screenshots of every outlet that publishes anything. Pull the social timestamps. I want a sequence of what they knew and when they knew it." Taylor's reply was instant. Already on it. Adrian's mind moved quickly. This was no longer just an in-flight dispute with a crew member. This was an active reputational battle unfolding in real time. She turned slightly toward Caleb Nguyen, who had been resting with his phone beside him. "Caleb," she said softly. He blinked awake. "Yeah." "Has your live stream been running the whole time?" He nodded. "I've been cutting to short clips to save battery, but I've got the first hour and a half archived. Why, I may need those raw files sent to my office before we land," Adrian said. "The airline is trying to control the story." Caleb's eyebrows lifted. "Oh, they're going to lose that fight. My viewers have been clipping the good parts all afternoon. It's already on 3 different platforms. That was good. The more angles the story had outside corporate control, the harder it would be for their version to take hold." Across the aisle. Martha O'Connor closed the paperback she had been pretending to read. "They're lying about you." Adrian's tone was steady. "They're attempting to frame it their way before I can frame it mine." Martha shook her head. "After everything we saw, that's not going to fly with anyone who was here." "Most people weren't here," Adrian said. "That's why they'll try." She tapped her tablet, pulling up her secure document folder. She began building a timeline boarding. First contact with Veronica Hale. Stephen Ward's intervention. Arrival of security. Call from Linda Chavez. And the commitments made before takeoff. Every timestamp mattered. Damien returned quietly, placing a fresh cup of coffee on her tray. "Courtesy of the captain," he murmured. Adrian looked up at him. "Mr. Brooks, I may need you to confirm details of this incident when we land. Are you willing?" He hesitated only a second. "If they ask, I'll tell the truth." "That's all I need," Adrian said. As he walked away, her phone buzzed again. Taylor had sent the first screenshots a blog headline already circulating. "CEO sparks mid-flight drama after refusing crew orders." She studied the wording. It was deliberately vague, crafted to provoke clicks without outright stating falsehoods. But the framing was clear. She was the aggressor, the crew the aggrieved. She forwarded the link to her in-house counsel with one note: "Prepare to issue a cease and desist if this spreads." Jerome Price leaned into the aisle slightly. "You're dealing with something right now, aren't you?" Adrian's expression didn't change. "Let's just say the ground game has started before we've landed. You need us to say anything he asked." "Not yet," she replied. "But when the time comes, statements from multiple passengers will matter." Jerome nodded, as if tucking the thought away for later. Outside the windows, the sky was beginning to deepen. That high-altitude shade of blue that seemed almost unreal. Adrian watched it for a moment, letting her thoughts settle into the quiet rhythm she always found before major confrontations. Then her phone vibrated again, this time with a push notification from a national business network. She tapped it. "Breaking dispute on North Star Airlines flight. 482. Involves CEO linked to airline's fleet contracts." They knew who she was, which meant the fight was going to escalate far faster than she'd planned. She leaned back, exhaling through her nose. If they were naming her before she even landed, they were betting she'd be on the defensive from the moment the doors opened. That was a miscalculation. Adrian typed another message to Taylor. "We will not respond to media inquiries until I'm off the aircraft. Prepare a holding statement confirming my presence on the flight and that I've been in contact with airline leadership regarding misconduct." "Nothing more," Taylor replied. Understood. Also, I've lined up an hour with the board tomorrow morning. Good. She'd need the board behind her if she was going to make contractual threats stick. She closed her tablet for the first time in over an hour. Caleb caught the movement. You're plotting something big, aren't you? Adrian gave the faintest smile. I'm making sure this conversation doesn't end when we land. The rest of the cabin was quiet again, but the stillness now felt charged, as if even those dozing sensed there was a current moving beneath the surface. She turned her gaze to the window once more. The ground was somewhere far below, unseen but inevitable. She thought about the moment the wheels would touch down, the instant the private conflict of this cabin would spill into the public record. She wouldn't meet them in the arena they expected. She'd built her entire career on entering through side doors while the opposition guarded the front. When the captain's voice broke over the PA to announce their initial descent into Denver, Adrian's coffee was still half full, untouched for the last 20 minutes. Her mind was elsewhere, mapping every call, every meeting, every signature she would need in the next 24 hours. This flight had started as an attempted humiliation. By the time she stepped off it, it would be a case study in what happened when someone underestimated the wrong person. She rested her hands lightly on the armrests, eyes forward. Landing was just the beginning. The seatbelt sign lit with a chime as the aircraft made its final turn toward Denver International. Adrian sat still, the hum of the engines a low backdrop to the storm building in her mind. She knew the gate would not be an empty hallway and a quiet walk to baggage claim. Too much had already leaked. Too much had been filmed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Denver. We'll be on the ground in approximately 8 minutes. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your seats are in the upright position. Caleb glanced across the aisle toward Adrienne. Do you want me to keep streaming when we land? Yes, Adrienne said without hesitation. Don't stop until I tell you. Martha O'Connor's eyes widened slightly. Are you expecting trouble? I'm expecting optics. Adrian replied, and optics decide narratives. The descent was smooth, the city lights of Denver glimmering through the oval windows. Adrian's phone buzzed one last time before landing. It was a message from Taylor, confirming local news vans already at Concourse C. North Star PR team is on site. Ground security has been briefed. Adrian's lips pressed into the faintest smile. They were setting a stage. She just needed to decide whether to play their script or her own. The landing was soft, barely a bump. The passengers, restless from the long delay, shifted in their seats. Overhead bins clicked open in people's minds before the fastened seatbelt light even went dark. Adrienne didn't move. She knew better than to join the jostle. The real play was going to happen at the door. When the aircraft finally stopped at the gate and the chime released everyone, Caleb rose first. Holding his phone low but angled toward the front of the cabin, he captured the first visible signs. 3 uniformed ground security officers positioned just outside the jet bridge, and behind them, 2 women in tailored Navy suits with North Star Airlines pins, PR handlers. Damian Brooks appeared from the galley, speaking quietly to Captain Foster. The captain nodded, then approached Adrian. Dr. Cole, the airline has representatives waiting to speak with you before you exit the concourse. Adrian arched one eyebrow. Waiting to speak, or waiting to escort? The captain's jaw tightened slightly. Officially, to speak. Then they can wait on my terms, Adrian said. Stephen Ward was nowhere to be seen. She suspected he had been discreetly moved off the aircraft first, a tactic to shield him from cameras. That was fine. She would find him in the record later. The first few rows began to file out. casting glances back at Adrian as if unsure whether to say something. Martha hesitated by her seat, then stepped into the aisle. "Good luck out there," she murmured. Adrian gave a small nod. "Remember what you saw. When the crowd thinned—" Adrian rose, adjusting her blazer and sliding her tablet into her bag. Caleb stayed just behind her, camera on. As she stepped into the jet bridge, the temperature shifted cooler, the air thinner and smelling faintly of industrial carpet. The 3 security officers straightened almost imperceptibly. The 2 PR women stepped forward in practiced unison. "Dr. Cole," the taller of the 2 began, her voice measured. "I'm Lauren Pierce, Senior Communications Director for North Star Airlines. We'd like to invite you to a private lounge to discuss the incident." Adrian didn't break stride. "No, we'll discuss it here." Lauren blinked, thrown for half a second before recovering. "We feel it would be more appropriate to—" "What's appropriate?" Adrian said, her voice calm, but with an unmistakable edge. "Is that you address what happened in the presence of passengers and crew who witnessed it? Privately is how these things are buried." One of the security officers shifted his weight, looking from Adrian to the PR team. The shorter woman spoke up. "We are committed to resolving this matter. Dr. Cole, we simply—" Adrian stopped walking. "Your company already committed to specific actions mid-flight: retraining, immediate suspension of personnel, public acknowledgement. I have those commitments recorded. This meeting will be about confirming them in front of witnesses." Behind her, Caleb's camera caught every word. Live comments scrolled across his screen. "She's not letting them hide this. That's how you handle PR traps." Lauren's composure faltered just slightly. "There are media outside the security zone. If you speak here, you'll be on record before our statement is finalized." Adrian's smile was almost imperceptible. "Exactly." For a moment, no one moved. Then the PR women exchanged a silent look. Adrian resumed walking. The officers stepped aside, allowing her to pass. As she emerged into the concourse, the waiting area beyond the gate was a mix of travelers and press. A row of cameras had been set up behind a retractable barrier. The flash of a single bulb went off, followed by the murmur of voices recognizing her. She stopped just inside the open space, turned to face the cameras, and let the silence draw them in. "My name is Dr. Adrian Cole," she began, her voice steady, "and I am the CEO of Cole Dynamics. I was a passenger on North Star Airlines Flight 482 this evening, traveling in a seat I purchased in full. During boarding, I was confronted without cause. My identification was challenged without verification, and when I refused to surrender my seat, a senior flight attendant struck my hand and attempted to have me removed." The press surged slightly forward. The PR women stayed frozen, caught between intervening and letting her speak. "I have spoken with North Star leadership," Adrian continued, "and secured their commitment to retraining. Immediate suspension of personnel involved and public acknowledgement of the incident. This is not just about me. It is about every passenger who has been treated as less than entitled to the seat they paid for because of bias, assumptions, or profiling." Behind her, Caleb moved slightly to frame her against the backdrop of the cameras, the live stream comments exploding with approval. Lauren stepped forward, microphone in hand, clearly intending to redirect the moment. Adrian didn't step aside. "North Star Airlines," she said, glancing briefly at Lauren, "now has the opportunity to match its public image with public accountability. I look forward to seeing if it will." She turned and walked away, leaving the PR team to absorb the weight of her words in front of every camera present. The security officers fell into a loose formation as they guided her toward the terminal exit, but the energy had shifted entirely. She wasn't a passenger being escorted. She was a principal figure leaving a press conference on her own terms. As they reached the escalator down to baggage claim, Caleb finally lowered his phone. That, he said quietly, wasn't just about winning. That was about changing the game. Adrian's eyes stayed forward. Games are optional. Standards aren't. The murmur of the crowd above faded as they descended, but Adrian knew the noise outside would be louder still. The press would chase it. Social media would amplify it. And by morning, the airline would have no room left to maneuver. This wasn't the end. It was the opening act of a much larger reckoning. The Denver night air was sharp as Adrian stepped into the black sedan, waiting at the curb. The driver didn't ask questions, simply confirmed her destination and pulled into traffic. Caleb had peeled off toward his hotel, still broadcasting to his followers. Martha O'Connor had given Adrian a small hug at baggage claim and whispered, "Don't let them forget you were here." Adrian sat back, phone in hand, scrolling through the flood of notifications. Her name was trending on 3 platforms. Clips of her statement at the gate were already being dissected by legal analysts and PR experts. The hashtags told the story. Memory seat 482, hammering flying while black. Adrian Cole. Taylor's name lit up her screen. She answered on the first ring. "They're in panic mode," Taylor said without preamble. "The board called an emergency session for 8 a.m. Eastern. I've been fielding calls from their largest institutional investors all night." And Adrian asked, "They're not happy. Most of them hadn't heard about the incident until your video hit the wires. They're furious it was handled mid-flight instead of through private mediation. One of them actually said, 'She just walked in and rewrote the rules.'" Adrienne allowed herself a small smile. "Good. That means they're paying attention." Taylor continued. "Also, I've confirmed something through a contact at Atlas Aviation. 2 competitor airlines have already issued internal memos about tightening their own boarding and verification protocols. You're moving the industry without even filing a claim yet." Adrienne's gaze drifted to the passing streetlights. "That's the point. Taylor. If this stops at an apology, nothing changes. But if I can make compliance competitive, then they'll fight to outdo each other on equity standards." "Do you want me to draft the shareholder letter tonight?" Taylor asked. "Not yet," Adrian said. "Wait until after the board meeting. Let them show us how they plan to position themselves." When she arrived at her downtown hotel, the lobby was quiet except for a lone concierge who glanced up, recognition flickering in his eyes. He said nothing, only slid her room key across the counter with a discreet nod. Inside her suite, Adrian dropped her bag in the corner, kicked off her shoes, and opened her laptop on the desk. The city lights glowed against the dark glass of the window. She started by pulling every clip Caleb had uploaded, saving them in chronological order. She added the screenshots Taylor had collected, noting the timestamps of each media outlet's first post about the incident. She built 2 timelines side by side, actual events and corporate narrative attempts. The divergence was stark. Around midnight, her secure messaging app pinged. It was Linda Chavez. "Adrian, the board has been briefed. The chair is aware of your statements and the commitments I made on the call. I'm advising you that some members want to walk those back. They'll argue you pressured me without proper procedural clearance." Adrian typed back, "You and I both know your role grants you authority to make operational calls during active incidents. If they disavow your commitments, they will be disavowing their own chain of command." Linda's reply came slower. "This time I agree. Just be ready, they're coming in hard tomorrow." Adrian didn't need the warning. She had built her reputation on walking into hard rooms. She poured herself a glass of water, sat back in the desk chair, and let her thoughts run. She wasn't just preparing to defend her actions. She was preparing to make the board commit, on record, to industry-changing policy. Her phone buzzed again, a news alert. The headline read, "Civil rights groups call for federal investigation into Northstar Airlines incident." Beneath it, a short statement from the National Aviation Equity Alliance demanded a thorough review of all boarding procedures that may enable bias or discrimination. Adrian's mind shifted gears. She typed a quick message to Taylor Reach out to NAO. "Let them know I'll speak at their summit next month. Free of charge." If Northstar thought this was just about a personal grievance, they were already losing. This was turning into a movement, and Adrian was positioning herself at its front. The hours stretched past 1, then 2, But she didn't feel tired. She drafted talking points for every possible angle the board might take: reputational damage, operational disruption, contractual risk, union relations. For each, she wrote not just a defense, but a counter-offer, a way to turn their fear into a commitment. At 3:30, she finally lay down, setting her alarm for 5. Sleep was light, more a series of drifting thoughts than rest. When the alarm chimed, she was already half awake. By 6, she was in the shower, the sound of water steady against the low hum of the city waking below. She dressed in a deep navy suit, the same shade as Northstar's corporate palette, but hers cut sharper, cleaner. It was a calculated choice, a visual reminder of who owned the narrative now. Taylor met her in the lobby, tablet in hand. "They're already gathering in the main conference line," she said. "We're patched in for the 8 o'clock. Adrian nodded. Let's give them the courtesy of being early. In the quiet conference room the hotel had provided, Taylor set up the video call. The screen filled with faces, some familiar, some only known from industry reports. At the center was the board chair, a silver-haired man with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd spent decades in corporate arbitration. "Dr. Cole," he began, his voice smooth. "Thank you for joining us on short notice." Adrian inclined her head. "I appreciate the invitation. We've reviewed the reports from last night's flight," he continued. "While we acknowledge the unfortunate nature of the incident, we have concerns about the way certain demands were made in the midst of an active boarding process." "Demands," Adrian said evenly, "or commitments your own regional director was empowered to make." A flicker of discomfort crossed his features. "Regardless, some feel those commitments were premature." Adrian didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Premature is deciding what action to take before knowing all the facts. What happened on Flight 482 was the opposite. Your representative saw the facts, confirmed them, and acted to mitigate further harm. If you walk that back, you are telling every passenger that your promises last only until the next board meeting. Silence settled for a moment. Taylor's stylus scratched quietly against her tablet as she took notes. Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You have an opportunity right now to set an industry standard, not because I demand it, but because it will protect your brand, your investors, and your passengers. You can fight me and lose in public, or you can join me and lead in public. The choice is yours." Some of the faces on the screen shifted, small tells in posture, the way a hand moved to a chin or a brow furrowed. She'd been in enough rooms to know momentum when she felt it turn. The chair cleared his throat. "We'll deliberate and provide a decision by end of day." Adrian smiled faintly. "I look forward to it." When the call ended, Taylor exhaled. That was something? It's not over, Adrian said. They're still calculating, but now they know I'm not negotiating for myself. She picked up her bag. Let's get ready for the real day. This is just the morning warm-up. By mid-afternoon, Denver was gray and heavy with low clouds. Adrian sat in the hotel lounge by the window, coffee cooling beside her. Taylor was across from her, scanning 3 different feeds at once, the hum of phones buzzing between them. The board's promised deadline was 30 minutes away. Adrian knew the call could come early, but she doubted they would. They would want to take every last second, as if delay itself could shift leverage back into their hands. A notification lit Adrian's phone. Caleb had just posted another clip this one of their arrival at the gate, set to music with the caption, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard." It had gone viral in under an hour. The comments were relentless in support. Taylor looked up from her tablet. NAEA just announced they're petitioning the FAA to adopt what they're calling the Cole Protocol, mandatory real-time verification of passenger ID and ticket records before any removal, plus onboard bias de-escalation training for all crew. Adrian let the words settle. Cole Protocol. She had never asked for her name to be on it, but she knew how things worked. Names anchored movements. At 4 p.m. sharp. The hotel phone rang. Taylor hit the speaker button. It was the board chair. His voice was deliberate, measured. "Dr. Cole, the board has concluded its deliberations. We have decided to uphold all operational commitments made by Regional Director Chavez on your flight. In addition, effective immediately, North Star Airlines will implement the Cole Protocol on every route in our network." Taylor's eyes widened slightly. Adrian didn't move, and the personnel involved. The chair's tone shifted, becoming almost formal. "The senior flight attendant has been terminated for conduct unbecoming of her position. The head of in-flight operations has been placed on indefinite suspension pending further review. Additional training will be mandated across all management levels." Adrian let the silence stretch. "You've made the right choice," she said finally. "Now I expect you to stand by it in the public arena. We are issuing a statement within the hour." The chair said, "We will include your name and acknowledge your role in these changes. We hope this marks a new chapter for our airline. Chapters require more than an opening paragraph." Adrian replied, "I'll be watching to see if the writing holds." When the call ended, Taylor broke into a grin. "That's it. You did it." Adrian leaned back in her chair. "No, we did it. Everyone on that plane who refused to look away, everyone who recorded, everyone who spoke out, they're the reason this didn't vanish into a file folder." By 5 o'clock, North Star's official statement was live. The headlines followed in waves. Airline adopts Cole Protocol. After high-profile incident. CEO passenger forces industry shift. North Star concedes to full policy reform. News anchors debated whether this was the start of a broader movement or a one-off victory. Adrian didn't answer when journalists called. Not yet. Instead, she asked Taylor to book a return flight, not in first class, but economy. Taylor gave her a questioning look. Adrian explained, "If the Cole Protocol is going to work, it has to work for every seat on the plane, not just the front row." That night, she went for a walk through the cool Denver streets, her phone tucked away. She passed restaurants buzzing with early dinners, street performers under awnings, the sound of a saxophone drifting from a corner. It was the first time in days she let herself breathe without thinking about the next move. Her mind went back to the quiet moments on the plane, the feel of the leather card holder in her hand, the look in the captain's eyes when she showed the lease contract, the subtle shift in the cabin when witnesses realized she was not just defending herself, but something larger. Change never came cleanly. It came in the middle of noise, in the press of uncomfortable eyes, in the grind of boardrooms and the chaos of concourses, and it always came at a cost. The next morning, Adrian boarded her flight home. She carried no entourage, no cameras, no fanfare, just her carry-on and a boarding pass like anyone else. At the gate, the attendant scanned her ticket and looked up with a smile. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Cole." No hesitation, no second check, no shadow of suspicion in the voice. She stepped into the cabin, found her seat halfway down the aisle, and settled in. The hum of passengers filling the plane was different now. Maybe it was only in her head, but it felt lighter. As they taxied, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "A quick note before takeoff. All our crew today have completed the new Cole Protocol training. We're committed to ensuring every passenger feels welcome and respected on our flights." Adrian looked out the window, the morning sun catching the wingtip. It wasn't a victory lap. It was a checkpoint. The work was far from finished, but the standard had been set, and it had her name on it. Taylor texted her mid-flight, "NAEA confirmed your keynote slot." Also, 3 other airlines have reached out asking for consult on implementation. Adrian typed back, "Tell them yes, but they'll have to meet the standard, not just license the name." When they landed, she moved with the crowd to the terminal. No one stopped her. No one whispered. She was just another passenger. And in a way, that was the quietest, truest win of all. As she exited into the open space of the terminal, she saw Caleb leaning against a pillar, grinning. "Had to see the new system in action," he said. "Looks smooth from here." "It's a start," Adrian replied. They walked together toward the exit, outside. The day was bright, the air sharp with the promise of change. Adrian knew there would be other flights, other battles, other moments where she would have to stand again. But for now, she carried the calm satisfaction of knowing she had taken one industry's hidden fault line and exposed it to the light and left it stronger than she found it. And so, a single flight became a defining moment. Adrian Cole didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't make a scene. She stood, steady and unshaken, until the truth could not be ignored. In doing so, she left an imprint on an industry that for too long let bias hide behind policy. It's easy to watch a story like this and feel outrage, but outrage is only the beginning. Respect must be more than a word. In a training manual, it must be the standard for every seat, every passenger, every journey. The Cole Protocol now stands as a reminder. One person's courage can create a standard that protects thousands. And while this story ends with policy change, the deeper message remains: dignity is not granted by an airline, a title, or a ticket. It's carried in how we face injustice and refuse to let it pass. If this story moved you, if you believe in a world where every traveler is treated with respect, then help us keep telling these stories. Like, share, and subscribe, so you're here for the next journey. Because there will be more flights, more moments, and together we'll be ready for them.